I'm going to be showing you how to use the bleeding tissue paper to create a really cool background on your artwork. What I've already done is I traced over my design with Sharpie, and just to kind of give you an idea of how it's going to look, I filled in part of the page already. What you're going to do when you get your bleeding tissue paper, you're going to have a spray bottle at your table, and you're going to spray the white part of your paper with that spray bottle to kind of create some water that the tissue paper can stick onto. And when you're putting that tissue paper on your paper, you want to make sure that those squares are overlapping each other so that there's no white spaces showing through. So I would just continue to cover the whole paper with tissue paper. And if you start to notice that your paper is drying out, you can give it another little spray, and that'll help to get the tissue paper to stick. You don't want to get your paper too wet though, or else it's going to create a puddle, and all these colors, if you get too much water on your paper, all your colors will blend together to make like one kind of gray brown color instead of them staying the separate bright colors that you already have. So once I'm done, we're gonna pretend like I'm done filling in the whole side of the paper. Once I'm finished, I'm gonna check and look for any places that have little bits of white showing through. Oops, you can kind of see what it's gonna look like. And if I see a place that has white showing through, I'm gonna give it a little bit of a spray, and then I'm gonna put another piece of tissue paper right on top of that little white spot. When I've got my whole paper covered, I'm gonna hold my spray bottle kind of far up, because remember when I was really close, it was blowing the papers up. So if I hold my spray bottle far away, I'll be able to cover that whole paper, and I can kind of use my fingers to push down any parts that are sticking up. So the goal is to have it where all of the tissue paper is laying flat. If you see parts that are not laying flat because they're dry, you can give it a little spray. Right here I see tissue paper that's wet, but it just kind of got moved around. So I could pick it up and give it another spray. If you start to see puddles on your paper, if you start to see like a puddle of water, you need to pause, get a paper towel, and just kind of pat that puddle dry. If you wipe it, it's going to move all of your papers around, and we want to let the papers dry overnight so all of the color from the tissue paper can soak into your artwork. I see that I have a little white space right here, so I could go back and just fill that white space in. When I'm happy with the way that the tissue paper looks, I don't have any white spaces, all of my paper is wet, all of my paper is laying flat on the artwork, I would pick up my artwork with two hands, and if you see big drips start to come off of your page, that means you need to put it right back down, go get a paper towel, and dry off whatever puddles or drips you have. If it is dripping, do not walk it across the room. Keep it at your table until you can dry it off to where there are no drips coming off of your artwork. Once it's dry enough that you can pick it up without dripping, then you can walk it over to the drying rack. My artwork dried overnight with the tissue paper on top of it, and now that it's the next day, I'm ready to take off the tissue paper and see what kinds of colors I got underneath. I'm going to use a trash can, and your teacher will call you up by table to go to the trash can, and you're going to just dump all of those papers into the trash. So we're not going to leave the tissue paper on our artwork. We already got the color that we wanted, and it's it's soaked out of the tissue paper and onto our artwork. There we go. Oh, that turned out gorgeous. So I want you to notice there are some places that are white, and that is okay. That is a good thing. That's kind of one of the beautiful things about this tissue paper technique, is that we get some contrast. We have parts that are really full of color, and then we have these like lovely, unexpected little highlights or little spots of white. So when you take your tissue paper off, if you have parts of your artwork that are still white, that doesn't mean that you did anything wrong. It's just kind of the surprise and the excitement of how this art material works. Once you've got all of the tissue paper off, you can start thinking about what kinds of art supplies do you want to layer on top, because this is like the background, and now we're ready to add other things on top, other art supplies on top. Once I have all the tissue paper taken off of my artwork, I can go ahead and start thinking about what art supplies would I like to use to color in the details that are on top of, that I drew on top of my background with Sharpie. And I just want to show you kind of what they look like so you can make a choice that you feel like will work for your art project. This right here is how the marker looks. So that's definitely one of the options that covers up the background the most. So if you want a lot of contrast in between your background and your details, marker is a really good choice. We've got colored pencil, and for colored pencil, I pressed down pretty hard so that I could cover the background and the colored pencil would show up. We also have oil pastel, and again, I pressed down really hard with that oil pastel so that it would cover that shape and make it pop out and show out against the background. The sparkly crayons, when you press down hard, you get that kind of metallic shine. They don't cover it quite as much as some of the other art supplies do. So it's a little bit more subtle. If you want something that kind of blends together and shimmers, that might be fun. And the construction paper crayons, those are those crayons that have the black wrapper. Those show up really nicely. When you press down hard with construction paper crayon, it really pops out against the tissue paper background. So you get to decide if you want to use just one art supply. You could mix and match and use different art supplies. I think you're gonna have a lot of fun mixing these art supplies together. And remember, if you have big spaces that are white, don't stress out about it, because we've got a lot of options that you can use to kind of add some more color into those spaces. And it's gonna create that really nice texture, really nice contrast. It's kind of part of the reason we love to use tissue paper to create a background in art.